Thank you, Mr. Quinn. I'm going to just offer it up to everybody at this point for comments and or questions, and we'll go from then. We'll open it up to the public. Ms. Johnson.
Yeah, I think just for the benefit of the public, because it is a little bit confusing. We have the very laudable tax reduction per household this year, but then we also have the impact of the property tax reval. So there's going to be a little bit of a up and down in terms of what the average taxpayer is actually going to see. And I think, Mr. Quinn, if I'm correct, the multiplier there of that 1.779 I've seen on one of the slides, that is what you multiply times your new valuation of your property.
That's correct.
And then you divide it by 1,000 and you get your new property tax.
That is correct.
Okay. And the reduction of the $45 per year is built into that multiplier, correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay, all right, so that's how you calculate, that's how you do the math, because there are all kinds of imaginative things going on out there in terms of what people think they should be multiplying by what in order to get their new property tax, so.
It's a little bit because trying to do the comparison,
yeah,
it's not apples and apples. You have to be able to go in and look what your, if we applied the tax rate to last year's tax bill and the new assessed value, and then look at it this year, you would see that.
yeah,
But because last year we were at $2.53 and change, more than that, per $100 of assessed value, but we were at about 72% of total assessed value for the equalized ratio. It's a little bit different now that we're at 100%. So, but when the homeowner, the bottom line is when they get their tax bill, come July, and the tax rate is certified, and they look at the bottom number, they're going to have to also include in the reval, because there's some people that may get, you know, a $500 or $600 decrease, and there may be some people that see a $500 or $600 increase because of their new assessed value of the property.
right, for example, if they put an addition onto their home or something of that nature,
Right.
and your property value is much more,
Right.
is more valuable, you can
Right.
probably see a little bit
And as you
more
know,
there.
certain neighborhoods that have very good sales and very strong sales that
Right.
affected the assessed value, compared to some neighborhoods where the sales were not as good and the assessed values came down.
Correct. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You're welcome. Mr. Sisler.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Quinn, what do you think the major concerns are as we move forward for our future budgets, and especially staying within the 2% tax levy cap?
The major concerns that I have, and that is the numbers that we don't have control over. Our pension costs, the state mandates, medical insurance for our employees. Those are, we can't negotiate those. You know, we're dictated as to what those numbers are going to be. So when they're coming in, with the medical coming in at 8 to 10% every year, with pension coming in higher than 2%, something on the other end has got to be cut to make up the difference. And it's when you're making those cuts, those are the cuts that are, you want to make sure that you're not affecting the services that we provide to our residents, that we're maintaining our infrastructure, that the staff that we have, that we are addressing their benefits, we're addressing their needs, they're getting small incremental raises, and to continue our workforce. So it's the outside that is my biggest concern, that we don't have control over in adjusting the budget.
Since I got on the council, we've been dealing with not just the Morrison Township, but in most municipalities with the downturn in the economy. We've seen a tremendous amount of tax appeals, particularly with our commercial side. What's our tax appeal exposure right now? What can we proactively do to reduce that exposure?
Our exposure at the end of 2015 was $1.7 million. $1.7 million. No. 1.7, right?
1.7.
Yeah. What the Township Committee has done consistently with the assistance of our CFO, Francine, is that when she's preparing the annual financial statement we're looking at, and we're putting money into that reserve so that we have money in place to cover that exposure. And we have that in place now so that when these tax appeals come up, you know, our tax appeal attorney is very good, and they're coming in much lower than it, but we have that reserve just in case. And we carry that over from year to year as, you know, the tax appeals come in year after year. And we'll see some tax appeals this year with the reval, I'm sure. We won't have that final number until May 1st, because they get an extra month this year because of the reval. But I'm certainly expecting that also, so we'll continue that policy also. It's just very prudent to do that. One of the things that we're doing to do is we look at some of the properties and what they are assessed at, and especially the commercial properties. And if we see a downturn in a commercial building where it's going vacant or it's become what we call not Class A office space anymore, we've done temporary reductions for the assessment. For example, we have a office building at 340 Mount Campbell Avenue. It is in foreclosure. It's going up for auction. We've temporarily reduced the assessment on that by $33 million. Well, why, you know, so they're paying less taxes on the $33 million. But the prudent thing to do that is, if they file a tax appeal and win, we're taking in 25 cents, but we're paying out $1. This limits our exposure of paying out that whole dollar, and we're only paying out a minimal amount. So we're looking at those kinds of properties. If we have to temporarily reduce that assessment to protect ourselves, we are doing that as part of being fiscally responsible and limiting our exposure on tax appeals.
Thank you. I want to thank all of you that worked with us and helped us and put this budget together. I wanted to just thank Mr. Mancuso and Ms. Johnson, who are on our finance team. I've been working in politics for almost 20 years now, and one of the things that I see in pretty much every poll that is ever taken and presented to me, from a statewide perspective to a countywide to a town, the number one issue is property taxes. It always is. When you go down into what you call the crosstabs and see what people are really saying, the first crosstab that comes up on the number one issue is property taxes. They say that Republicans nor Democrats can do anything about it. They don't believe that either party or any politician can actually reduce property taxes or do anything about property taxes. And Ms. Johnson was correct tonight to say that the reval was out of our control. She's correct that Morris Township did reduce taxes and should be commended. But when people say in that crosstab that neither party nor politicians can actually reduce taxes, well, they need to look no further than Morris Township. Even though the reval is out of our control, and like you said, some people might not get that reduction because of that reval shift. We did our job. Mr. Mancuso, Ms. Johnson worked hard to make sure that even though that increase was there, we had a little bit of a reduction as well. So I know how hard it is to do this. As a former mayor and a former member of the Finance Committee, I believe that Mr. Mancuso and Ms. Johnson need to be commended big time. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Nunn.
I have two questions. One relates to the school ratio, considering that is the biggest component of the resident tax dollar. You mentioned there was a shift. So,
Sir.
can you explain to the benefit of the public how much of a shift there was?
Yes.
Whether that's a shift that we can project as staying flat, or do we think that is a variable? And how, if it shifts back to how it was in 2015, will that impact us prospectively?
It's equalized ratio, so they pay, so everybody's on the same playing field, us and Morristown, when dealing with it. If we didn't have the reval last year in 15 going into 15, we were at 72% on the equalized ratio. Morristown was at 85%. Going into this year, if we didn't have the reval, we would have been up around 74%. Morristown had a significant drop to about 80%. So it brought us a little bit closer together. As I said, it's a pendulum where in 2010 or 11, we were on the wrong side of the pendulum. As we came into the 2013-14 school year, we were at paying 67% of the tax levy for the school district.
When you say we, who do you
I mean, the township of Morris,
meaning our residents?
our residents. And Morristown paying just under 33%, but same amount of kids going to the school. That came down a little bit in 2014-2015 school year. It came down a little bit more for the 2015 to 2016, 66.28 compared to 33.72. So a little bit, not a lot. And it was strictly offset also any decrease by the school board, increasing the tax levy by 2% every year. With the change in the equalized ratio, with Morristown going down, with us going up and bringing us closer, there was a significant change in that equalized rate and the percentages. We are now at 63.74% this year versus 36.26. But we also have to remember, we're only seeing that benefit for half the year because they're on a different fiscal year than we are. They're on the July 1st to June 30th. So we're seeing some of that benefit this year. Some of that benefit will carry over into the first half of next year to be determining the tax levy for the school district for next year. Hopefully it will continue. We're seeing, usually where the levy is going up for the township of about $1 million per year. We're seeing a reduction in our levy this year of about $130,000 that we can pass on to our residents.
Thank you. My second question relates to what Mr. Sisler spoke about. Perhaps both you and our wonderful auditors can elucidate for the public the following. So we know that we have state mandates that have increased over the past year, 2 years. We have contractual obligations to increase salaries, yet we're cutting taxes or reducing the tax rate, so hopefully giving homeowners a break. Counties, municipalities sometimes tout the 0% tax rate increase, right? We've all heard that, we've all seen that. And in one of your slides, you mentioned a tax spike. So how can our residents be sure that by us reducing the tax rate this year, they're not going to 2 or 3 years from now have a spike that would eat into our fund balance?
One of the reasons that you will not see municipalities probably keeping a $3 million fund balance, you're probably seeing them that they're much lower in other municipalities. By maintaining that about the $3 million or just a little bit above, if for some reason where pension costs came in or healthcare costs came in at 20%, how are we going to fund it? We actually did it a little bit last year where we had some significant significant reductions in the budget and finding the money. We used some of that fund balance and paid ourselves back this year with that. And it's maintaining that available bank of money is part of the prudent fiscal responsibility that you can manage your budget from year to year, and you don't have to worry about, well, my fund balance is down to $500,000, and if something big happens, I don't have any money. How are we going to pay for it? So I guess those are the unknowns, the mandates, and we just have to work hard to make sure that we stay within the budget numbers. That in 2010 it was to the point where we had to do actually a reduction in force and reduce services because of the significant loss in state aid. I think we're beyond that. I think that was an anomaly for the township and for a lot of municipalities. I think we are in very, very healthy condition right now. And I think if you stay with the fiscal responsibility that the Township Committee has shown for years and years and years, that we'll be able to overcome any adversity that we have with any of the state mandates or increased costs, without having to go to the significant things of reductions or employees or laying off employees or reducing services for our residents.
I see our auditor nodding her head. up
Yeah,
and
I'm
down.
nodding my head, and the only other thing I would say is I don't believe from our review and everything, there's nothing in the budget that was omitted that should be here that you would see a spike by all of a sudden having to put back into your budget, like you didn't eliminate, you did not do capital, you did not do certain items, so that to show the reduction this year, that all of a sudden when you go to have to put those projects or those items back in your budget, that's where you would see the spike. That's what you did not do. So that's what I
So
wanted
to
to-
coin a term from a former president, we didn't engage in any funny math so that the residents think, we're going to get a tax reduction this year, but, wait 3 years down the road and then you're going to really see it. There's none of that.
There's none of that in there, which is why.
Let me just jump in the, what we do every year or every few years is we look at what funded projects, capital projects have been completed. Is there excess money left over? What do we do with that money? And we had that this year. Now we had about $1.4 million in projects where there's now money left in those accounts that is no longer needed. We just didn't take that money and go out and spend it. We have a few projects there, but Fran has squirreled away more than half of that for future years.
Go for it.
Thank you.
All right, way to go, Fran.